Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have your company, and I'm even more excited to have Isaac Wuest joining me on this webinar today as well. I'm going to ask Isaac to introduce themselves, but really quickly, my name is Kanish Sharma. I run product marketing here at Tidelift. Isaac, would you like to introduce yourself and say a quick word?
Of course. Yeah. Thanks so much, Kanish. My name is Isaac Wiest. I'm a product manager here at Tidelift. I'm excited to present a little bit about libraries and Tidelift and talk a little bit more about how it can plug into your workflows and hopefully solve a few problems that you may have. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Kanish.
All right, let's get started. So today we're here to help you understand the difference between the data that you get from libraries.io and from the Tidelift subscription. Let me set the stage a little bit before we get into some of the content we have. So um, we're talking to you all who are familiar with libraries, are typical users of libraries. You're either a developer, an engineer, a software engineer, part of the security team, part of the legal compliance team at your organization. Let's say you are a developer wearing the hat of a developer on a large enterprise team. You are asked to build out some additional capabilities for an application that your team is supporting. You've done the work of understanding the requirements, and you figured out that there are a couple open source packages that you want to bring in as part of this development process to make your life easier. That's the typical scenario at most organizations today. So, in an effort to make sure you're being responsible about the types of open source packages you're bringing in, you probably are going to libraries.io. You might even have started your journey at some place like Google or an upstream package manager such as PyPI or Maven, or you may have gone to GitHub. There are several various sources of information out there on the internet that provides you information about about metadata that related to an open source package. Libraries, as I'll say now, and we'll continue iterating this, it does a really good job of sort of aggregating that data in a centralized manner. It does the data gathering work for you, the raw data gathering work, right? So you might go to libraries and you might grab a couple pieces of information, and that's what I want to get into over here. So what is libraries, right? Libraries.io is a free service. It's maintained and run by Tidelift. And as I said, it collects publicly available open source package metadata, and that's great from the internet. You can use libraries to do things like search for open source packages by license, by language, or to explore new trending and popular packages that might be coming on board. There are several uses. I gave a couple examples of what people use libraries for. Here is what we believe you should use the data that you get from libraries.io for gathering raw package license and dependency information. And then you can also use libraries as a synthesized data stream for scraped information across multiple package managers. So libraries has information metadata related to millions of packages across several different ecosystems, and you can use that. You can use libraries as a data stream for raw scraped information. However, what I want to flag at this point is that the data that you get from libraries.io, libraries is an open source, freely available tool. The data is not validated for accuracy, and hence it should not be used for important decision-making purposes. So again, if you are looking, you might be looking to gather information, make responsible decisions. Depending on the level of impact of those decisions, you might want to be a little bit more mindful about using data from libraries for important decision-making. That's where really Tidelift comes in, right? Tidelift is built to help you make important decisions with reliable, accurate data that has been analyzed and researched by humans. So the Tidelift subscription is a curated source of data and intelligence for millions of open source packages across multiple languages. It's backed by Tidelift and our partnered maintainers who we pay to ensure that their projects follow specific enterprise grade software development practices, both now and into the future. So again, this is where if you are a developer looking to figure out, hey, what package should I bring in? You might get some very raw data from libraries.io. That data is not reliable. It has not been evaluated for accuracy. And if you make decisions based on that, you might have long-term impact, or you may have to go back in and rebuild your application because the data that you collected did not factor in some important pieces of information that your legal team required or your security team required, hence requiring you to perhaps redo all the work of development that you did up front. So let me talk a little bit about what we typically see Tidelift being used for, the Tidelift subscription being used for. It starts at the planning phase. This is where organizations are able to take prioritized actions to tackle risky open source packages. What do we mean by that? Basically, evaluating package metadata, open source package metadata, along with several insights coming directly from open source maintainers with regards to what secure development practices are being implemented. What is the maintenance plan? Is a specific version that I'm curious about end of life, or what's the latest version, and how, should I be migrating to that latest version? So that's all in the planning phase. In the code and building phase, the ability to check before using for vulnerabilities, for legal and also software supply chain risks. So you obviously don't want to use anything that has an active vulnerability impacting it. However, a vulnerability may be a false positive. And again, Tidelift is able to sort of differentiate that by having the maintainers of the projects provide recommendations directly to you. And then also, what is the license? So Tidelift has accurate, reliable first-party data about license information that we make available to you. And Isaac's going to show you all of this in a quick moment. During the build phase, it is during the build and test phase, it is to implement continuous quality checks and assurances that packages aren't getting abandoned once you've made that upfront decision to bring in a package, having evaluated all the metadata and all the insights coming from maintainers. And then finally, in the monitoring stage, to implement continuous ongoing monitoring for changes. Is there a new version? Has an older version been deprecated or end of life? Is there a new version with a new license associated with it? So there's several early risk indicators that you can measure and evaluate in an ongoing manner, as well as, are there, again, new vulnerabilities and available remediations and patches for vulnerabilities that might have impacted the package that you're using. All right, very quickly, putting the hat back on of a developer. Let's say you are a developer today looking to evaluate package X with libraries. You'll get some upfront raw package insights that has been scraped from upstream package managers and source repositories. This, again, is not validated for accuracy, so be mindful of that. With Tidelift, you get extensive and human-validated package metadata that you can use for reliable decision-making. Another aspect is that Tidelift, I touched on this in the last slide, we pay maintainers to implement secure development practices. These practices include things like two-factor authentication, whether there's a security policy, who's the security point of contact. All of this data is only available via the Tidelift subscription. It is not available with libraries.io. So, for example, if you were looking to use package X and your security team required you to only use packages that had two-factor authentication implemented, you didn't have that information available via libraries, and so you said, well, let me take the chance and use it anyways. And then when it comes time for testing, that's when the security team raises a flag, says, hey, Isaac, you need to go rebuild this, thus leading you to unnecessary repetitive work that you could have avoided had you known that upfront. And again, that's what Tidelift is able to provide you. There is license data. So again, libraries is gathering license data from package metadata. It's not validated It's gathering this information from places like GitHub, from package managers, so on and so forth. With Tidelift, we undertake manual research and validation for accuracy of the data that's coming in. There are instances where licenses aren't available. We'll go do the research to figure out what the accurate license is, and we make that available in the form of a normalized SPDX expression. There are several dependency insights that are available with libraries. Again, those are limited, but and also not validated for accuracy. With Tidelift, on the other hand, there are extensive dependency insights, oftentimes human validated, either by the maintainer themselves or Tidelift's data science team. And we also are able to provide dependency graph relationships so you can understand what package is bringing in what transitive dependency. Libraries.io, again, you may, a security requirement may be that you don't build with packages that have active vulnerabilities. Libraries.io does not have vulnerability data or vulnerability insights available. However, Tidelift does have that information. We gather this data from several sources and we ingest it into the Tidelift subscription. We also then undertake the work of mapping it to specific versions and then also combining it with specific maintainer sourced insights, such as things like, hey, is a CVE really impacting me? Is it a false positive? If it is impacting me, what is the likelihood of impact? Are there any workarounds? What are the remediation recommendations? Last slide before I hand it over to Isaac. Couple other things. Libraries does not include insights on things such as maintenance status. What I mean over here is things like whether a package or a version is deprecated, if it's end of life, what might have been the renaming history of a specific package. None of that is available with libraries. Tidelift is able to provide extensive human validated information as it relates to deprecation, end of life, package rename changes. All of that is available with Tidelift. Tidelift also, as part of our evaluation of open source packages, we provide a baseline recommendation for whether a package should or should not be used by organizations. And those recommendations are only available via Tidelift. They're not available via libraries. The data coming through from libraries is available in the form of APIs. These APIs are limited and they're restricted to 60 API calls per minute, so one per second. With Tidelift, on the other hand, these APIs are robust. There are several APIs. Isaac will go into that in a minute. There is enterprise support and an SLA available, and the rate is customizable based on what your usage requirements might be. Lastly, libraries, if there's a package that you're interested in evaluating and does not have that data, there's no assessment SLA that is included as part of libraries. Tidelift, on the other hand, customers of Tidelift have an assessment SLA that we make available to them. So you can rely on the fact that data that you need is going to be available to you in a timely manner. All right, I am going to stop sharing. Isaac, I'm going to hand it over to you to see all of this fun stuff in action.
So awesome. Thank you so much, Kanish. I'm going to be showing kind of a compare and contrast between libraries and Tidelift. And inside of this compare and contrast, we're going to be talking about some of your daily workflows, ways that you already use libraries, how those may look or operate differently with the Tidelift subscription. Hopefully this will give you a clear sense of some of the plug and play types of functionality that would affect your use cases. Okay, so with that being said, right now I am looking at an example package. This is URL lib3, a very popular package. Some of you may have used it or been exposed to it. And of course, I'm looking at it in libraries.io. Now, of course, there's a few reasons I may be here. If I'm an engineer or a developer, I may be evaluating URL lib3 to see if it's a good new package to bring in for a given feature or set of functionality that I'm working on. I may also be evaluating it. Another reason is that we already use URL lib3, but I need to upgrade to a newer version. 2.2.2 is going to be the latest version of URL lib3, and I might be, a major behind or several minors. These are two common ones. If I'm a security or legal individual, I might be coming here looking for licensing or any other information that would tell me if this is a safe package. Now, Of course, when we look on this view here, we can see that we're using the MIT license, the URL-lib3 is. There are 0 dependencies indicated, and there's a host of some metadata about it. Now, of course, the benefit here is that this is a consistent data model across packages that you look at and across package languages, ecosystems. So if I'm looking at a Python package like URL-lib3, I'm going to get the same data here as I'm going to get if I'm going to go look at an NPM package such as QS, which is an example that we have right here. It's the same layout, the same data model. That's one of the benefits of libraries. However, libraries is not going to be able to tell us all of the information. It's not going to be as robust as Tidelift's approach is. We think of this information here as consumer grade. This information is useful. It's aggregated, just like Anish mentioned. I can once again see the licensing here and the dependencies, but let's take a look at what we get in our kind of workflow when we use Tidelift. So I'll go back to URL-lib3. I'm going to hop over to the Tidelift view. A couple things that stand out immediately. The first one is the legal risk involved. So we actually see that this license is verified by the maintainer of URL-lib3. We work with this maintainer, or what we call a partnered maintainer. That's what this big banner here indicates. Second, we can see that there's actually a second license that they use. This is an example of a situation where libraries isn't always going to show you, and most other package managers may not always show you upfront what all the nuances of what licenses apply to a given package are. We'll see one other example I'm going to show you of licensing, which is called iText here. In this example, you'll see license actually marked as other right here in libraries. But if we go ahead and jump over to Tidelift's view, you'll actually see that they are using the AGPL3 license. And this is something that we manually researched. So you'll see this as kind of a data standard that's a cut above what you're going to find when you're searching on Google or searching on libraries for information about legal risk. Okay, so let's go back to URL-lib3. So we see that the licensing information here is going to be more accurate, more holistic, and as a result, help kind of mitigate legal risk. In addition to that, we're going to get a whole new class of data, which is security data. So remember, when you're evaluating a package, you're thinking about bringing it in, you're thinking about upgrading. One of the considerations is whether or not the package is secure, whether or not it's safe. Now, that might not be initially top of mind, but it certainly will be once any kind of SCA tool you may have runs during whatever kind of CI/CD pipeline you may have operates. So oftentimes the piper typically has to be paid when it comes to security. It's just a question of whether you had that information earlier in the process and were able to make an informed decision, or if security or someone's going to be bugging development saying, hey, we have all these issues that just arose. So what does that actually look like? Well, if we jump over to vulnerabilities here, we'll see a list of vulnerabilities that affect this package and the specific releases. Then if we dig a little deeper into a given vulnerability, we can actually see a lot of bespoke data that the maintainer on this package provides exclusively to Tidelift. So this information here includes, what is the likelihood that this vulnerability actually affects, the usage of URL-lib3? Is it a false positive? Is it exploitable if it's used as a build tool or a test dependency? Additional information about the vulnerability, and of course, other conditions that users of this package should take a look at. So this is a much more holistic and useful way of quickly identifying potential issues, whether or not they affect your releases, and if they do affect your releases, whether or not those issues should be concerning given your unique implementation. This is one of those advantages of working with that maintainer of URL-lib3 is that we can get this information and provide it to you. In addition to that, if we take a look at dependencies, you'll actually see a host of more precise dependencies listed here than what was listed on libraries. Now, I'm actually going to switch over to QS to show you a little bit more in depth about dependencies. So if we go to QS here, you'll see that this has one dependency noted on the right-hand side. Once again, we have all this kind of standard metadata that you can get in libraries. However, if we take a look at this same package from Tidelift's perspective, and we go to the dependencies section here, what you're going to see is that there are in fact 30 dependencies for this version here. Now, some of these dependencies are dependencies that run during the process of development, right? And some of them are runtime dependencies. Now, right now, libraries is thinking about and aware of runtime dependencies, but that's not the whole picture, right? There are 29 other dependencies that also do operate, during testing and development when you're utilizing this package. Those are all various types of risk vectors to be aware of. Again, just kind of denoting the difference between a consumer grade and an enterprise grade set of data and kind of risk understanding and profile. Okay, so that's dependencies right there that we have taken a look at. Now, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how this fits in, not just from a UI perspective into your workflows. We've already talked about, you know, the way that this helps with new package selection, the way this may affect upgrading packages, being able to see the specific versions, see what dependencies are associated with them. Of course, how this impacts legal risk and security risk. Once again, libraries doesn't have a lot to say about security, and what it does have to say about legal is often a bit incomplete. Again, it's that publicly available data. You're not going to find complete legal data in any of the other services when you're Googling, even if you aren't using libraries. You have to kind of do that research yourself manually, and that's what we do here at Tidelift. So you've seen how it fits into those workflows. In addition, though, there's an API side to this. So many of you who use libraries may already be aware that there's an API in libraries that's rate limited, where you can get access to this same set of metadata. Well, Tidelift, of course, we do also have a much more enterprise grade level API. Now, of course, you can always dig into the way this functions in our documentation here. I'm going to talk briefly about the packages API, though there's many other ones that we offer as part of the Tidelift subscription. So if we look right here, what we're seeing is that when we call the Tidelift API, what we're actually going to get is a response that contains a host of metadata about that package. Everything that you saw in the UI exists here delivered in JSON, API form. You can see whether or not it's recommended, right? Again, this is our bespoke calculation. Um, the reasons it's recommended, potential alternate packages if you're on the hunt for a new or replacement package to an existing one that may not quite fit the bill or maybe end of life. Of course, we could go further down. We're going to see, what the security policy is, what the versioning scheme is, all of the contributors count, etc. Now, we don't have to go through all of this because, of course, you already are aware of a lot of this data because you saw it in the UI. The difference here is that when you have API access to it, you're able to ingest it at scale. So again, in one use case, you're an individual developer, so is going looking for new packages, looking for upgraded packages, looking for replacement packages, etc. In this use case, you're setting up a more scaled system to deliver that data to either people to make decisions or systems to automate decision making and thereby streamline the kind of management and selection processes inside your organization. All right, so that's a brief overview of kind of the key differences and how they would fit into your work stream. So with that said, I'll pass it back to you, Ganesh.
Thank you, Isaac. I'm going to share my screen once more so our viewers know how to contact us. Do you see my screen, Isaac?
I sure do. Looks great.
Okay, so I wrote down a couple things, and prior to getting this webinar done, we also reached out and gathered a couple questions. So I just wanted to share a couple observations first, though. That license difference that you pointed out with iText, especially, right? iText, there wasn't a license on libraries associated with iText. Tidelift, we had done the manual work of figuring out what that license was. Now, that might seem trivial, but in the case of iText itself, they underwent some licensing changes not very long ago that requires now that anyone using iText for app development make their features that they build on top of iText also available in the same open source license. So if you are unaware of that, that's some pretty significant legal consequences that you may not have covered yourself for. And again, that leads to things like, someone from your compliance team coming to you and saying, Isaac, sorry, bud, got to go back and, take iText out. So we are not in some kind of legal jeopardy, right? Other couple things that I wrote down was you showed that screen relating to vulnerabilities, and especially the information coming from the maintainers themselves. I thought that was really, really impactful. And I think, to begin with, just the holistic nature of the information coming over there, right? Like, if we hear so often people are in this sort of vulnerability remediation hellhole where there's one after the other, after the other, after the other. But where do I really start? Like, help me figure that out, please, right? Like, what's actually going to be impactful in reducing risk for our organization? And a lot of that information coming from the maintainers is setting up our customers to make the most informed decisions about prioritizing vulnerability remediation. So you may not want to remediate a vulnerability that has an impact score assigned by the maintainer of something under a 4. That can be prioritized for a later time. But if it is, something that's over a 7, that might be something you do right away. Or if there are certain methods of how that vulnerability is impacting you, that's another sort of filter that you can use. So I think all of that data, I wrote this down. In the age of AI that we are, this is human intelligence. AI cannot give you these kinds of insights, right? And then the last sort of point I wanted to make was just the dependencies, right? Like, again, you might just say, okay, this is the one dependency that libraries is telling me about. That's all I got to worry about. Regardless of whether it's development or runtime, if you want to be holistic and complete about how you think about your software supply chain, then you need to think about all the development dependencies that you are being impacted by as well, because somehow or the other, they will still impact you, and they will impact the health of your software supply chain. So it's really important to think holistically about dependencies. And then the last thing I wanted to also just point out, correct me if I'm wrong, in the APIs, a lot of how our customers are using our APIs is to integrate them into workflows such as Jira or business intelligence tools such as Power BI, right? And then also the fact that you talked about scale. Libraries is throttled to one API call per second, whereas with Tidelift, you can query up to 1,000 APIs or 1,000 packages at a time in terms of the output for the metadata that we provide, right? So again, the scale is enormous with Tidelift versus libraries.io. Okay, all of that said, let me get to a couple of the questions. Can you dig in a little bit more, Isaac, on the relationship between libraries and Tidelift, please?
Yeah, of course. So, of course, Tidelift has a lot of this accurate data that's human verified and researched. Libraries is essentially an upstream data aggregator that helps to feed a backlog of data that we then process, we clean, and we research. So it's one of several sources of data that ultimately build our much more accurate and robust data that we provide through Tidelift.
Awesome. Thank you. And we were just talking about APIs. Can you just explain a little bit more about the libraries APIs in terms of throttling? I think that's pretty straightforward. And then also more specifically, what is the data provided via Tidelift's APIs? And anything that someone should be mindful about.
Absolutely. So I'll start just by encouraging anyone here that's curious, whoever asked the question too, go ahead and take a few minutes after this call and look at some of the API documentation, because I'm not going to be able to tell you everything in particular that Tidelift offers. There's a long list of different APIs, but I can give you the broad strokes. So of course, libraries is going to give you package metadata and pretty much everything that you saw on that screen, in terms of information about what dependencies it does know about, and certain information about where the package can be found, and important links and release information and such is going to all be available via that libraries API call. Now, of course, what's not going to be available and what Tidelift is going to be able to offer is a more robust set of data. That means there's going to be additional data fields that are, in some cases, calculated that determine whether or not this is a recommended package or release. There's going to be a whole new data set around security and CVEs and vulnerabilities, what they are, what they affect, whether or not they may or may not apply to you. And in addition to all of that, there's several APIs that we have that are going to allow you to pull reports and additional information at scale about multiple packages at once that you're using. So, once we start to move from that individual use case into the, okay, here's an organization, right, that has a lot of open source that needs a lot of data, right? Those APIs aren't just serving an individual use case, they're serving aggregated use cases, which mean, we can tell you, okay, here's all of the packages that have vulnerabilities, here's all the releases on those, here's what their risk is, here's what the importance of them are, and whether or not we consider them, high risk for your specific organization, in order to kind of drive internal decision making, prioritization about what to move off of, what to upgrade, what you shouldn't be worried about. All of that is available via the API. There's probably about 12 or so different APIs I would recommend, briefly taking a look at, but the core of what I just mentioned is captured in our packages API, our releases API, our vulnerabilities API, and our reports API.
Thank you, Isaac. And then the last question is, can you just help people understand a little bit more about paying maintainers, especially as a customer of Tidelift's? What might someone come to expect as a value proposition of paying maintainers?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tidelift, from its inception, wanted to partner with maintainers and pay them as a way to both improve the overall health of open source and keep maintainers doing what they love to do, trying to avoid maintainer burnout. Now, what that actually means in terms of using open source is it means that we get access to about 2 or 3 different types of information and data. So the first one is that maintainers commit to upholding certain types of what we call secure development standards or practices. This includes using things like 2FA, doing things that are considered best practice while they're actually managing and maintaining their given package or set of packages. And that's the first thing is they make a commitment and they attest to it. So we actually take record of and verify that they are following those practices. The second thing is we get access to bespoke information that only that maintainer can provide. So you already saw some of this. That includes information about security vulnerabilities, CVE vulnerabilities. That includes information about potential licensing nuances and changes. That includes data around what their security policies are in terms of what versions of their packages, what releases do they support, and in what ways do they support them into the future, et cetera. So it gives us access to all of this much more bespoke data. And this data helps individuals who use those packages, right, be assured that they're going to be able to make high quality decisions about what to use, what to upgrade to, et cetera. The final one is that those maintainers commit to continuing to maintain that package into the future. Now, that might seem obvious, but for those of you that have been around the open source world, and for many of you that are engineers probably have felt the pain of using a package and the maintainer kind of disappears, or they end up getting burnt out and it no longer has support. And who knows how deeply integrated that given package is into your application, into your infrastructure. The risk of having to pull it out and replace it could be substantial. Certain ecosystems are a little more vulnerable than other ones. Like Java or Maven is particularly vulnerable to this type of situation since those packages tend to be quite large. So that's the third thing, and this is kind of one of the missions of Tidelift, of course, is to make sure that these maintainers don't feel burnt out and don't end up no longer able to contribute to the open source community.
And in instances where they are really burnt out, it's okay for them to be burnt out. That's the premise of open source, right? But that's where there has been documented evidence of Tidelift working with the open source community to sort of come in and find a maintainer who would be willing to step in and take over responsibilities. So this way, making it easier for our customers, not having to again re-architect and be able to continue using those packages. Isaac, my friend, thank you so much for your partnership. I hope our listeners were able to get a good sense of when they should be using libraries, what it's really meant for, and then really the additional value that what they can expect to achieve from Tidelift and the longer term benefits associated with it. So with that, we'll end for today. Thank you all so much for listening. And again, Isaac, once more, thank you so much for your partnership.
You bet. Thank you so much, Kanish. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Take
Have a
care.
good time.
Bye-bye.